So let's talk about contract jobs and contract activities. I'm going to start with my pinned list and I'm going to go to my client, Tech Solutions. Now we're going to create a contract job. So if I go to contract jobs, it's going to list all the jobs that we have for this client. But I want to create a new contract job. So when I click on that, it's going to show me contract job. So who's my contact at this job? Is there a contact at this job? Let's say Bob is going to be the contact for this job, but the report to on this job is going to be Billy. I want to click these boxes here. Those are going to allow me to go through the contacts in the system on that client. I could also quickly search up here, and it's going to break down and filter the contacts. Don't just start typing a name in these fields. Click the squares, use the squares. So this contract job, we're going to say the contract job is open right now. Let's say it's for a secretary. The report to is Billy Verasto, and it's going to be the front office secretary is going to be the actual job title. So you can see the job title and the position can be different. What type of order is this? Well, this is a regular straight up temp order. Who is it taken by? Well, let's say I took the job. Actually, let's say Frank took the job. So what branch is this related to? So this is the Melville branch. And what line of business? So I can choose what line of business I want here. The phone number is going to filter down from the client. Are there any activity notes, which I'll be able to find after this job is saved? Who's the bill attention? Once again, if I click this, I can choose which person I want the bill attention to be. Is there a bill attention department? What are the contract terms? So most of them are going to be net 30 terms. Is there a PO related to this? Are there any references that need to be added for the invoice? What's the type of invoice? This you'll probably get from your manager or maybe even the client, but make sure you choose the right one. Let's also try to push that we email the contract invoices to the client. So you would choose that, and then you would add the email address where those are going to be sent. Sales tax, Ohio and Pennsylvania need to be in here, but otherwise you don't have to choose it. That'll be done in back office. Any state code, localities, workers' comp codes. You have to make sure that there's a workers' comp code in here, and it will reflect mostly off of the position rather, but make sure that that's in there. And is there any workers' comp in state that needs to be added? Your job description, whatever you put in here, will filter to the web publish area, which we'll cover later. But this itself is only for internal, view. So the job description here, while initially we'll take and copy to the web publish job description, you can change that here. So you can put whatever you want in here so your team knows what the description of the job is, what any of the boy, that was tough. Any of the requirements are, as well as any skills, test certifications, or licenses are necessary. What are the week parameters of the job? I'm going to say this is a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday job, and it's going to be the first shift. What is the start date? This is going to be, for me, seasonal. So we're going to say this is starting on the 17th of December, and it's going to end on the 3rd. On the 3rd. Let's do the 1st of January. So my start date got blanked because I chose the wrong end date. But again, let's say it starts on the 17th and ends on the 1st. My start time, I could either scroll and find it, or I can type it in here. 530p. It saved it. What is my pay range from? So let's say it's from 12 to 16, and we're billing 21 to 27. How many people do I need for this position, and how many are remaining? So 16 days total. The hours per day, that will actually calculate after we close and save this. How did this come in? And territory, if it was an account executive or a synergy, you would want to go to territory and choose who it came from Lloyd. Any location, any specific industry. Auto web publishing, let's leave for now. Let's save this job. So right now, WC state code, workers' comp code is required. So I got to go back. It's going to bring me up. We're going to go to New York, and we're going to click save. All the other information is necessary is in the system. So right now, this job is saved. If I look on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a few more info details, which we're going to cover in a different training. That's for the Q initiative, quality of job, quality of candidate, and all that. So that'll come later. So now that we have the job created, from here, let's just go back to our client. So now you come in tomorrow morning and you sit down at your desk and you say, okay, let's start working on this job. I'm going to go to my client and contract jobs, or did I have this contract job pinned? I didn't, but I'm going to now. So I just added this secretary to my pinned list. So now every time I need to access it, I can just jump right to it. But let's say that we're going to create a new contract activity to submit a resume. So I'm going to go here. What is my activity? My activity is resume sent to client. Who filled it? Me. The start date is going to filter from the job. So I want to make sure that I go in here and change that to today's date. And the end date I could just remove because I'm just changing the activity. When did I submit this this resume? So right now I see that it's around 11 o'clock here. So I'm going to choose 11 a.m. There's no end time. My branch is going to filter. My line of business is going to filter. Any other information? Do I want to say anything specifically about this candidate? Great fit for client culture. Hoping to hear back today. So that's my candidate profile, what other members of my team are going to see when they look at this activity. What are my details of the matrix? Again, does not need to be changed because this all filters down from the job order. Web time card is extremely important. Make sure that that's checked so the time card can be pushed to the portal. Any other references, any other information I need to add here? I really don't because all that came over. So right now I'm just going to click save. So now when I go back to my job, I'm going to see in the contract activities that a resume was submitted to a client. If I wanted to do this for an interview, I would do a new contract activity. I would go back down in here and I would choose client interview. I would choose myself as the PC again. Now, the client interview start date should be when the activity is taking place. So say the activity is taking place on Monday the 19th. Again, it doesn't need to have an end date because it's just sending that person out for the client interview. What time is their interview? And they're going to meet at 11 a.m. Again, no end time. So now my client interview is scheduled. It's going to pull my candidate from either, from up here, or if there was a candidate added to one of my previous activities, it will filter down as well. Any information here, all this can stay the same. So right now I can save this activity. Now we have two activities created that we can view by going back to the job. I go back to the job, I go to my contract activities, and it shows that the candidate first name and last name submitted a resume and was also submitted to a client interview. Now, let's say that client loves Billy Verasto, which, come on, they're gonna. So I can go back to my client. I'm sorry, not my client. I'm on my job. Good. So I would create a new contract activity, but this activity is going to fill the job. So it's still going to pull my candidate, my report to, and all that information. I need to choose who made the fill. The job start date and end date is the job start date and end date of the job. If they haven't changed, they don't need to change here. So now this contract activity is filled. All this information is correct. What is my pay rate and bill rate? This can be changed if it needs to be. All my bill departments, my web time card, again, extremely, extremely, extremely important. What's the gross margin on this job based on my pay and bill? And any other information required can be there. I click save. Now watch what happens. So now my contract activity is filled. If I go back to my job, my job is filled. So that's a good thing. So now, if I go back to my candidate, watch what happens to Billy Verasto. Billy Verasto is now working contract. So let's try that again, but let's say that this job was finished early. So I could go to my pinned, I could go back to my job, pull up my secretary. I can go to my contract activities and my filled activity. I could open it up and I could change that. And let's say that that activity ended on the, well, let's say that the start date happened on yesterday, but it ended today. So I would go in here. I would say that this is complete. I would save it. So now when I go back to my job is completed. I go back to my candidate. I'm back to being an available candidate. So in a nutshell, everything is fueled by an activity. That activity or new activity must carry the flow from the job order to the candidate. Everything is an activity. Don't ever go into a job order and change the status if there are activities related to it. So again, you create the job, you create the activity, you either change or create a new activity, and then you finish it off by changing the final activity. If we didn't, and that activity went past the end date, it's basically going to leave that job open unless you extend it. I'm sorry, it's going to close that job unless you extend it. So you need to be aware of that as well. We'll cover a couple other things down the line when we just talk about general workflow, but this is pretty much the nuts and bolts of a contract job order and a contract activity.